But a punishment can be me inflicting the word that we use is consequence, but now I'm confusing all the terms. A consequence for your poor behavior. You are
The
punished.
literal definition is the infliction or imposition of restriction or penalty or suffering.
Okay, but you
It's
said harm.
intentional infliction.
Yep, fine. I'm okay with that. Intentional infliction. You said harm. We have
Suffering.
punishment.
The word is suffering. We cannot. I'm going to take a hard line. This is going to be similar to what we said before. I think we're actually probably very close. But if an adult in the life of a child intentionally forces them to suffer, that is so harmful to their psyche.
Okay.
To take their language, we want to keep their body and mind safe.
Correct.
That is destructive to their mind if we intentionally cause them
So
suffering.
what do you call ISS and OSS?
So here's the language. To me, we might be allowed to call it a consequence, although honestly, my definition of consequence, it occurs without any additional action. I don't do my homework, I fail. No adult had to do anything. I ran down the hallway, I fell. No adult had to do anything. To me, it's still accountability, and here's why. I'm worried that the other people in this school are not safe. We're going to need you to stay away from this for a little while, and then we're going to have a process for your return. Because when a kid has ISS, isn't there a process to return?
Mm-hmm.
Don't they have to agree to some terms?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's still accountability.
But if they don't, this is where I think I like the idea of consequence, that it's a mutual thing. Because if I say you have to do these things to return, that is accountable. What if, and think about academically, what if they don't have the skills? What if they don't have the
That's what accountability is.
But it's accountability. But if they're accountable, if I'm held accountable to something that I know what to do. I can't be held accountable to something that I don't know how to do. I can't be held accountable to an action or an idea that I don't know. So I have to learn.
Yes. So here's what I would argue. The accountability process is a student has not become proficient in the skill. Because there's almost nothing a kid doesn't, at least lightly, understand about the norms of a school. They haven't mastered that. Every kid in the school, anybody who says, who calls another kid names or makes fun of a kid in class, they know they're not supposed to do that, but they have a mastered alternative to maintain their status.
I think sometimes you use general language that I would disagree with.
Tell me more.
When you say they know they're not supposed to do that, not all of them do. I just actually had a kid walk off the campus today, calling, saying, "Fuck you, Mr. Miller, you're a bitch, you're a pedophile."
He knows he's not supposed to do that.
He doesn't think, he might think that the school doesn't like him to do that, but he doesn't think that that is wrong.
Well,
you have students.
Yep.
So you have students doing things that they might say, I don't know that. Or they might not know that.
Yeah. So, why does that matter, firstly? Secondly, because we still want to hold them accountable. We're always reteaching. That's part of the accountability process. So
Agreed.
I don't actually think that matters. But secondly, we're not holding them accountable to what they believe. We're holding them accountable to the standards of the social norms of school.
So I don't disagree with that. So if we're holding them accountable to our standards, okay, then I think that actually draws this line more clearly, which is, we are saying this is our standard. And you can, so now let's make this language synonymous. We're saying this is our expectations of math understanding. This is our expectation of English writing. This is our expectations of behaviors at North Middle School. We might assume that they have some knowledge of that, but if they don't, and we say you must always be teaching, that puts responsibility on the school staff, teachers, and administrators to teach that child those things. I cannot hold them accountable to those things if they don't know them. You hold somebody accountable to something when they choose not to do it. And that's the grade system. We do this with grades as well. Like this is our definition of engagement. If you're not willing to do it, that's the teacher's job. I need to get you willing. If you have the skills and you're able to, and you choose not to, that's what you're being held accountable to.
I disagree because there's all kinds of kids who take tests. They don't know how to do it and they fail the test.
Well, that's a grading issue. I disagree with that in the grading issue. To get them right,
Sure.
I think that's a fault of how we do grading. I'm talking about this whole time when it comes to social emotional learning. When kids don't know how to handle their emotions, when
Mhm.
kids don't know how to take criticism or handle the emotion of home, and they come into school and they act a certain way.
They don't get to return until they fully demonstrate that they get what it is,
That's a
right?
punishment.
It's a scaffolded approach to accountability.
Okay, your step
Support,
5
support,
is a
support.
punishment.
No, absolutely not. It's painful. See, this is the difference. It's painful, but it is not punishment. I'm not trying to make that kid suffer.
Agreed.
I am. Infliction of suffering is the definition of punishment. I'm not intentionally trying to inflict suffering. I am, because that kid only has to suffer as long as he doesn't figure it out. ISS, I mean, if you're using that
I
and you
guess
don't have a
maybe
return plan,
I mean, part of this is I want to redefine punishment.
we don't
Because
get
to me,
we don't get to redefine punishment.
well, I want to. We're redefining all sorts of stuff. That's what we're doing.
I don't think so. I think we're clarifying the definitions that already exist.
Maybe. I just don't, I don't like this. I think then punishment, the idea of a punishment can work. I don't like, and I think you and I agree, I don't intentionally want to cause harm to anybody.
Um, I think I can. That's getting me closer to a place that I can live with. I probably have to see that differently. I am also going to tell you though that I disagree strongly with your argument that you can't be held accountable to something you don't know, because that's actually usually how it happens first. And
Well, okay.
here's my
I
best
don't disagree
example.
with that. Okay.
The best example is the law doesn't care if you know the law.
We've been talking about relieving some of the unnecessary burdens of teachers.
Mhm.
If when a teacher comes down and they use the word consequence, they're putting all responsibility on a student. But if we tell them, guys, consequence is both parts, different accountabilities. So if you are accountable to you and you can look at your principal, the student, the parent, and yourself in the mirror and say, I taught, retaught, tried to build relationships. I sacrificed my lunch to reteach. I brought him in after school. I did all the right things. You have fulfilled your accountability piece. The student then can say, I know what to do now. I know what to do next. I'm not willing to do it. Okay, then you are accountable to your actions. And your actions fall under the umbrella of when you choose not to do that, the consequence is you're going to have a poor grade. You're going to have poor relationships. You're going to have Saturday school. You're going to be put before the administrative body for admin hearing.
Yeah. The reason I don't like that is because it separates it from the process of accountability.
I don't think it does. It actually enforces accountability. You are accountable to you and your actions.
Why do we need that term then?
Need what term?
Consequence.
Because
The
there is a
last stage of
consequence.
accountability is you can't return to social norms until you demonstrate the behavior with
Because
proficiency.
we can't ignore the natural. There's consequences to everything we do. That's a natural, normal thing.
Getting Saturday school is not a natural consequence. It is an intentional action by an adult in the building, and it better be to hold that kid accountable.
Sure.
It's not like in my mind, that's not a consequence.
It can be a consequence. It's a consequence.
Let me explain it differently. The consequence of being an asshole in class is you create friction, you create stress, you create anxiety. That is the consequence. Because of that, we can't allow that. We have to protect people. So to hold you accountable to the expected behavior, you are removed from this space until you demonstrate proficiency of that skill.
Okay, removing somebody from a space, an intentional removing of somebody from a space. What is that?
That is holding someone accountable to a skill until they demonstrate.
It
the
is,
consequence
because
is the anxiety or stress.
They're both. It can be both. What we're saying is there is consequences to life. There's consequences to behavior.
Absolutely.
There's consequences to thought and everything. But I can't take on the burden of changing you. I can be accountable to what I
Absolutely.
know I am held responsible for, and
Mhm.
I know what I can do. So if I hold myself accountable and I'm held accountable by my boss, by the law, by all the things, then I relieve the burden of changing you because you are accountable to you. But both of us being held accountable and acting in accountability, there is consequence, good and bad. If you are accountable and I'm accountable, the consequence is our relationships are solid and strong,
Yeah.
and we're learning things. You hold yourself accountable. That's what I'm saying. I'm not
Yeah.
holding anybody
Keep
accountable.
teaching.
Yeah, be accountable to teaching. That's what I'm saying. Hold yourself accountable to be a teacher.
That's the accountability piece. It's not the consequence.
I agree. That's accountability.
Yeah. So here's what I'm saying. I think you want to hang on to that word consequence, and I understand it, especially in your role. I think if we protect any of the language that is causing the harm, and you've said before that consequence and punishment get confused, if we keep any of that language, all we're going to do is take accountability and draw that into it. Because what's going to happen is now consequence, now punishment. So now we're back to punishment.
Nope, because I
Consequence
think
is the
we can
bridge to
clearly
punishment
say, and we
because
can
it's
clearly
unnatural. You're suggesting that consequences can be unnatural. They can be driven by the will of someone else.
no, I'm
Because
suggesting that there is a consequence to everything.
I agree with you, but we don't have control of that. Here's why. I'm going to give you the perfect example. If you're angry when you give the consequence, it can vary, right?
That's when you start
We
getting
in
into
schools
punishment.
are supposed to limit variance.
This is where I think this is actually beneficial. And to me, you're proving my point because we have chosen to use the word. So I'm going to ask you to just be open minded a little bit on this
I am.
because we have chosen the word engagement, and we know that it's controversial, and we know that it's confusing, and we've chosen it because it is controversial, it is abused, it is misused, and so therefore we want to pick it apart and make sense of it. Correct? And that's on the academic side. So on the behavioral side as well, I think we can stand up there and say, what to your point, if you're emotional and your emotions are driving your decision making, you are teetering into punishment, and punishment is bad. We are not here to punish anybody because once your emotions start taking effect, then you're wanting to install pain on somebody else, and that is
Yeah.
wrong. That's destructive and wrong. So consequence is not emotional.
Yeah.
Sometimes that consequence is on you. You feel shitty. The people around you feel shitty, but there's also brokenness. But a teacher cannot feel the weight of burden to go and change every student. So we say there are consequences to actions. You,
Yeah.
however, cannot enforce consequence to change behavior because if you do, you're walking into punishment, and that's bad. But you are accountable to you. You are accountable to your actions. We are also holding the student, and this is where teachers will like it because if I say you can only do what you do, you be the teacher, the student will also be held accountable to what they can do. And if both of you do those things, the consequence is restoration, the consequence is change behavior.
Okay. See, that I like, but I want you to hear why I like it. We didn't spend any energy creating the consequence.
No,
We only focused on the accountability steps. Because what I think this is where you and I are the disconnect is you're placing consequence at the fifth stage of accountability, which is you don't get to return to normal behavior or normal school life until you've demonstrated some level of proficiency of that, right? That's the final stage of accountability. We're still not controlling the consequence or outcome of that. We're only creating the conditions to change the outcome. But if we're dictating it, it's either a punishment or it's a support. It isn't a consequence. The consequence happens naturally.
I don't disagree with that, but I also think you can say there are to every action there is a consequence.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So when there's a
but
consequence,
why do
when
we
there
need to talk about that? Because are you suggesting that people need to hear that word? Because
I'm
I think
suggesting that because it's so ingrained, much like engagement
yeah.
and in teacher talk, in school talk, and because it is such a divisive word in our buildings. It is what drives, and you and I have heard it already in our little workshops. When they send a kid to the office for being a turd, and the consequence is they're sent back with a sucker, that's their frustration. So we want to say,
So
guys, we understand that there needs to be consequence to actions. What we are going to define is we are going to say, I don't know if I'd like the word need. We understand that there are consequences to
there
actions.
are
Okay,
consequences. Yeah.
there are consequences to actions. What we want to do is define some terms and think about you and I are presenting this to a district, and so we have superintendents, we have principals, we have teachers
Yeah.
in the room, and we
Yeah.
say what we want to say. What we want to say is punishment should never be in your schools. Never, never, never. And you're going to hear a
Sure.
gasp of what? And then you
Yeah.
throw up your description of because it's intentional harm. That's bad. And so if we can define that, yes, everyone's on that same page. Then we say, but there are consequences in our buildings, good and bad. You are not responsible for your child. You are responsible to provide an education to always be teaching behaviors and academics.
If we're in agreement that our mind will not spend any time trying to craft what the consequence is, and our mind will simply focus on the steps of accountability, that
Yes.
I can live with. Um, and also I think if what you're telling me is that teachers, administrators, everybody will need to hear the word consequence, then I acquiesce as long as we agree that the consequence is the outcome, it
Okay.
is not our action.
So let's do that. I appreciate that. So I think they need to hear it, and here's the reason why, because they say it all the time.
This is where if we feel like a consequence is a kid has to spend some time in ISS, that was the outcropping of the accountability. Like that was the natural outcome of that kid not demonstrating proficiency at the last stage of accountability. If that student now goes to another location and they are with another adult, we can describe that as tier 2 or tier 3 behavior intervention, where we have a behavior specialist who's giving extra time and attention to whatever that lacking skill is. I'm going to, so you have this arch thing. I almost want to treat it a little different, let's say consequence. And there's natural and then there's procedural. Do you hear what I'm saying? And then, yeah, so I'm glad we did this. So if you look closely, we have punishment, hard line, we're not going here. We have consequence, we have accountability. Most of the time, consequence is just a natural thing, but sometimes it can be procedural as in part of the accountability process. We can remove that kid from the class, but we can't ultimately control what the outcome is. But we have to give permission to everyone to accept that accountability is also painful. But pain isn't the point. Punishment, pain is the point. Suffering is the point.